Hello, everybody, and welcome to the War Room. This one is for the UFC 256 co-main event between Tony Ferguson, the former interim champion, and Charles Oliveira, one of the most exciting contenders in the division right now. Okay, let me just quick lay out where we're at with these guys. So first of all, Tony Ferguson, 26-4. Charles Oliveira, hang on, I've got it written down here. 25-4 for Tony Ferguson. 12 knockouts, 8 submissions, 29-8 for Charles Oliveira, 8 knockouts, 19 submissions. For Tony Ferguson, submissions, 3 Darces, which is what he's obviously known primarily for, 2 rear naked chokes, a triangle of flu choke, and a mounted triangle armbar. For Charles Oliveira, 7 rear naked chokes, 4 guillotines, 4 anacondas, and then we've got a nice little selection of triangle armbar, inverted triangle armbar, and then armbar. So he's got a nice variety of attacks, but very, very aggressive with his attacks, very quick fire. So I'm very, very excited for this fight because I think these guys, not only do their styles both interest me, but they complement each other quite well in the way that they fight. Let's start this. Okay, so where do we start? So for Charles Oliveira, there are 3 real routes for him to win fights. The first one is attack very aggressively with a submission, chase after it immediately, get the fight to the floor, attack with whatever he feels is available when they're dry, when when it's easiest to control somebody. Easiest to control somebody as far as the sweat on their body. More difficult because they're fresher. But obviously, if you've got such a high level of jiu-jitsu, you know what you're doing to control somebody manually anyway. It's easier to control somebody when they're dry, especially if you know what you're doing. So that's the first route to attack. He attacks very, very quickly. He attacks with submissions, and he gets the fight to the floor. The second route integrates more of his striking, and this is where we've seen a development in his time at 155. So he came to 155 in 2016. He's 8-1 at 155. In the same bracket of time, Tony Ferguson is 3-1. So you can see how much of a work rate Charles Oliveira has had in comparison to Tony Ferguson. So I'm going to start with a couple of examples of I want to show you basically how he approaches fights. If he's attacking very quickly, like he did in the Jim Miller fight, he gets the fight to the floor and then he generally attacks the back. What I wanted to show you about this fight is how he adjusts here. I'm just going to show you this on the full speed version. You see how Jim Miller's got his leg hooked in this position here. This is there are so many ways I could talk about Charles Oliveira and his game. There are so many facets to it, but he's very, very well rounded, and that's the thing that's nice about it. It seems to have developed out a very strong submission game, and then he's added takedowns to his submission game to help instigate a grappling match in MMA, and then from the confidence on the ground and not really caring if his opponent takes it there, he's developed this amazing, really nice, clean Muay Thai striking skill set. But when he's taking people down, as you see here with Jim Miller, you see a nice little adaptation because Jim Miller hooks the leg. He's expecting to be thrown over in this direction, suplexed. So that's what he's guarding against here. And what you'll see is that Charles Oliveira is going to kick it free before the takedown. There, look. Just that one of those little things that I notice. Just a very good awareness of where he is and what's slowing him down. Problem solving in the moment. With this situation here, we see it even more. It's this right leg here, kicks it free before he hits him to the floor. So as I was saying, in the Jim Miller fight, this was a very aggressive, attack the back, get the hooks in. Each one of these hooks here is a problem for Jim Miller to be solving at the same time as all different kinds of things going on his upper body, attacking from his blind spot from behind, trying to fight arms, trying to peel things off, control a wrist. Very, very difficult to do with Charles Oliveira, who's not only excellent at controlling with his lower body, but also keeping his opponent preoccupied with his upper body. And then what you'll notice in this one is it's switched to a body triangle, which then two problems with hooks become one major problem with a body triangle. Because then you've really got to fight to get free of that back control. This is the other approach, when he's not necessarily chasing the submission and it kind of presents itself. And this is where we see, the development of his striking. And what's lovely about this is how he jogs back to clear himself some space. So, with the benefit of elevated striking skills is that he can now start to pressure people. So it's either, he pressures them, he hurts them, or, basically forces them to decide that they want to shoot. That's much more what we see from Tony Ferguson. Oftentimes with Tony Ferguson, we'll see him hurt somebody and then the submission attack starts. They'll shoot in, he'll attack the neck, they'll back up and run away, he'll chase them down and jump on their back. With Charles Oliveira, if you're level changing against him, you're in a whole world of problems as far as neck attacks go. So let me try and summarize this. So like I said, he started with an excellent submission game. He developed into a much more of a mixed martial arts fighter in his more recent fights, in my opinion. There was a real turning point around, it was kind of the David Tamor fight, I feel. That was really where I started to see a big step up in his confidence, in his striking. He's always had good footwork. This is one thing I will say about him is he's got a good understanding of you're either in the center controlling the octagon or you're on the edge, moving laterally, trying to find your way in. They're really the two options. A lot of fighters get caught in like a gray area where they're kind of standing off to the side with their opponent and no one's really making a move to control the octagon very well. That's one thing that Oliveira is very good at. He will control the octagon, but he won't be forceful at it. He won't be reckless about it. He's got a nice tight high guard. He walks people down, quite happy to walk into punching range, but has got a nice chopping low kicks. He's also got a good skip knee that he uses quite a lot, even if it's just to cover distance, and that's something that we see from Khabib when he's closing distance, because, the risk of a flying knee is that someone's going to level change and take you down. But, if you Charles Oliveira or if you Khabib, that's not really an issue. So we see him take risks. We've started seeing him throw more spinning kicks as well. But really, aggressive with his striking attacks, which allows him to bear over people and then start attacking their neck is something that's quite consistent. Now we've seen developments in his striking. As I was saying, with Tony Ferguson, we see something quite similar. Oftentimes, he's on his feet, he's moving quite unusually. He tags somebody with a clean shot. This is what we see in the Rios fight here. Hits him with that short left hook, and then Rios level changes, shoots in and finds himself wrapped up in a Darce choke, which, is really what Tony's known for. Now, Tony's game is not, I don't feel like it's as technical or as well rounded out necessarily as Charles Oliveira's. There's a definite chaos to it. There's a definite recklessness to it. And, he's a much bigger risk taker. Oftentimes in these trades, as you'll see here, he's landing a shot to take a shot. And he will quite happily gamble on the power of his shots compared to the fragility of his chin. I don't know whether that will change after the loss to Justin Gaethje. It may do, but of 25 wins, he's got 12 knockouts. So he knows that he can hurt people, and he's got good long range striking as well, which I want to come to in a little while. But this is another good example. So obviously in the Mike Rios fight, he pressured him into shooting. And was able to wrap him up in the Darce. With the Gleison-Tibau fight, this was much more of a hurts him, Tibau backs off, and then he jumps on his back and finishes with a rear naked choke. So more opportunistic in his submission attacks than Charles Oliveira, who's got more of a clear route to this is exactly how I'm going to take you down and get the fight finished. And take you down. However, sometimes he'll land in half guard bottom and he's not too bothered. With his grappling skills being so elevated, it's really kind of, I'll make the best of any bad situation you give me. Tony Ferguson, like I said, he has a wrestling foundation, so he is much more able to kind of manage the range of the fight in most of these circumstances. So I'm not saying that Tony Ferguson's going to get taken down by Charles Oliveira necessarily, but what I am saying is that even if he's able to defend a takedown in circumstances where most fighters will shoot on Tony Ferguson's leg and get caught in a Darce, Charles Oliveira may shoot, he may body lock and try and tackle him, but at any point where his neck's in danger, he's going to pull guard, he's going to pull half guard, he's going to give you side control because he's going to know the danger and he's going to forfeit the position to keep his neck safe, especially because he will have researched Tony Ferguson. I mean, Ferguson's been at the top of the division for a while. So when Charles Oliveira moved up to the middle, the lightweight division, he will have looked up the rankings at who's there, and obviously, Tony Ferguson's a mainstay, so he would have been watching him, paying attention. he'll know what Tony Ferguson's good at. He'll know the skills he brings to the table, particularly the Darce choke if there's a scramble for the neck. So submissions might be off the table for Tony Ferguson in this one. It might just be a problem that he doesn't want to get into. Because if he finds himself on the floor, that we might start to see some edges in his ground game that such a high level grappler with a good foundational game as well, good basics, good understanding of how to progress and move through different ranges on the ground instead of maybe jumping on something and seeing an opportunity and taking it. Charles Oliveira can find various different pathways into different circumstances to threaten you with submissions. I mean, it's literally one after the next. I mean, just while we're here, I'll just jump onto UFC stats quickly. So when it comes to the stats speak to it. So we've got Tony Ferguson with less than a takedown per 15 minutes. As I said, most of the time it's people shooting on him, or it's some chaos where he knocks somebody down and jumps on them. But the majority of the time, he would prefer to stand and strike. He's got a higher striking rate than Charles Oliveira. Was it 580? I need to get the zoom on this screen somewhere. 580 to 327 for Charles Oliveira. Striking accuracy not quite as high, but again, with Tony Ferguson, it's much, much more about volume. It's more about, I'm just going to throw everything at you. There's stuff coming from weird different directions. And did we get into? No, we're getting to Oliveira next. So there's so many things to think about that eventually something's going to get through. And then when one thing gets through, something else gets through, because the more success Tony Ferguson has, the more his confidence is on the rise. And a little bit like Nate Diaz, the more he seems invincible to whatever's coming back to him. Like, how did I think of it earlier? Erosion. He erodes his opponents. He wears them down. He just slowly takes chunks out of their face, out of their body, and gets them to a state where they want to level change, or they're hurt, they're dropped, they're rocked, they scramble away. He attacks them, and there's a much clearer route in Tony Ferguson's game in how things play out. It's much less guided by Tony Ferguson. Charles Oliveira, I feel like he knows what he's trying to achieve in these fights. And I think he knows when he's coming into this fight against Tony Ferguson that he's got the advantage on the floor. But I also feel like he's going to want to test Ferguson's striking as well, especially coming off the Gaethje fight. Seeing where his confidence is at, seeing, how he wants to approach this fight himself. And also, the evolving striking of Charles Oliveira. I've picked out this clip from the Tamor fight because it's one of my favorite strikes that he throws, and it is so Anderson Silva. I did pull that clip, but it looked so terrible. The quality was so poor. Anderson Silva, Tony Strickland. Do you remember the up elbow? It was so nice. Had this have been a finish, it would have easily been one of the best knockouts of the year. Unfortunately for Oliveira, Tamor has just got such a chin on him. But so watch this. So the other benefit in this is that Oliveira slips his head off to the side. So his lead hand's going to do this. It's going to come over and down, and that's going to leave the point of his elbow up, facing the chin of Tamor. Off to the side. Bang. Really nice. Steps up, hits with the elbow. Let me show you I've got a slow-mo version as well. So this is, as I was saying, this is more the Tony Ferguson end of Charles Oliveira's game. Back them up, hurt them with strikes, concuss them, and then jump on them. And that's, as we know with this fight, that's how it finished. It was the up elbow that started the end. But, Tamor turned his back, then he turned back into him and got wrapped up in this anaconda. And this is where the submission game of Charles Oliveira is always there in his back pocket. He's quite happy to stand and trade punches. He's quite happy to throw strikes in your direction. You can do what you want with his ground game. You can either try and avoid it as much as you can, and he'll get you there somehow. If you succumb to his strikes, then that's a different route entirely. Something that we're seeing more in his more recent fights. His striking opening up his submission game instead of the opposite way around. Instead of him having to force the fight into his submission game himself, which is where So we talk about his career at 155. So he's had He's 8-1. That one loss on his record is Paul Felder. And what went wrong in that fight is that he threw everything in the kitchen sink at Paul Felder in the first round, but didn't want to strike with him. Now, whether that was a game plan decision, whether that was a concern about Paul Felder's striking being the strongest part of his game, which obviously is clear, how Charles Oliveira dealt with it then and how he would deal with it now are very different. The Charles Oliveira that came out of that fight started to look very different. You know, he went from Felder to Guida, where he pressured him into a guillotine. Then he went on to the Christos Giagos fight, where he basically wore him down into the second round, then took him down, took his back, choked him out. Then we saw the Jim Miller fight, where he came out, clamped onto him immediately, and in a minute 15 he was tapped into a rear naked choke. But then from that point on, I mean, we saw a little bit of his striking in the Guida and Giagos fight, but then Tamor, Lentz, Jared Gooden, and Kevin Lee all were real big statements in how his striking game has stepped forward. And, you know, going from the Tamor fight with that up elbow that could have quite easily been the finish of the fight, we then move on to the Lentz fight, which, you know, this is where he actually made a decision to continue striking when, you know, maybe Charles Oliveira of a few years ago would have jumped on the back and taken the rear naked choke. So in the Lentz fight, you'll remember he catches the leg and throws a clean right hand down the pipe and drops him. And I mean, he only catches the leg for a moment so he can uncork that power punch. But it's what he does when he lands, which is really nice. So you'll see Nick Lentz turn over. Now, this is the point usually where Charles Oliveira, and you can see how he's pressuring down with his knees as well. Both of his knees are into the back of Nick Lentz. This is usually the point where this foot here steps over into a hook and takes his back, finishes with a rear naked choke. But the reality is, a couple of fights earlier, he'd already won he'd already broken the record for submissions in the UFC. So in this time, instead of, you know, dropping him and finishing with a submission, he continued to strike. And the thing that I wanted to show you was this control here. And this is something that is quite easily missed in this position, because we've got the downward pressure from both of his knees coming into the back of Lentz, but we've also got the control of this ankle. So even though Nick Lentz is trying to roll over and get away from these strikes, he can't get his left knee to the canvas, so he can't turn away entirely. He's being pinned in somewhat of a, you know, I mean, you know, the torque in his midsection, because as Oliveira is driving down, he's also pulling back on the leg to kind of keep him trapped in this position where he can just finish with ground and pound. You know, so now he's striking confidence is growing, his striking ability is growing, his chances that he takes are starting to manifest themselves a bit more. With Tony Ferguson, his striking game, much like his ground game, is a lot more unorthodox. Where Charles Oliveira has got a real clean Muay Thai skill set, where he keeps his guard high and he walks people down, chops them with low kicks. He's got nice boxing skills, nice skip knee, you know, good skills that you see him put together very nicely, very, you know, in good combinations, and really expose, you know, weaknesses on individuals. Tony kind of throws a barrage of things. Oftentimes he'll throw a left kick with a left hand, and then he's on one leg when he's throwing a jab, then he's coming with a spinning elbow. There are positives and there are negatives to that style. The positive is that there's so much variety coming at his opponent that something's going to get through. I mean, this is the thing with MMA. You know, with boxing, you can hide, you can create a good guard in boxing and cover the majority of your valuable targets. In Muay Thai, not quite so much, because they can be exposed. In MMA, absolutely not. With the 4-ounce gloves, you've always got a leaky guard. There's always holes in it. So with the volume and the variety that Tony Ferguson throws, always something is going to get through. The other thing as well is it's quite difficult to plan for Tony Ferguson because he doesn't really know what he's doing. And this is where his striking game gets really difficult for people. And given the fact that he fights at such a long range in the 155 division, is where we see him start to expose people with these really whipping long hook punches. It kind of reminds me of there's a martial arts analogy about certain types of punches. And this type of punch with Tony Ferguson is much like a ball on a chain. You know what I mean? He's not necessarily firing his opponent like Charles Oliveira does. Nice, clean, straight down the pipe. Sometimes he does, but even then they're coming off weird angles. But the range that he fights at is very impressive, and that could be problematic for Charles Oliveira if he finds himself on the end of that range with Tony Ferguson. I expect Oliveira is going to have to fight out of a good defense and cover a lot of what's coming towards him before he finds a way in. He might even want to jump on Ferguson and take him to the floor just so he doesn't have to deal with that chaos. But the Tony Ferguson coming into this fight after the Gaethje fight, he might not be as confident himself in his striking range. He might not be as chaotic. He might have added something new to his game. What was I going to look at? So how the striking compares. So as you can see, Tony Ferguson on the UFC stats page has a higher strikes landed per minute, slightly lower accuracy, slightly more strikes absorbed per minute. But he's not quite as precise. That's one thing I will say for sure. Oliveira is very good at finding his way through the guard, whereas Tony Ferguson, as I say, he erodes his opponents. He bombards them. But at the same time as him being quite chaotic, it does serve him well because he's very much in the moment, and he does tend to respond quite well to what's coming at him. Aside from the Justin Gaethje fight where he just seemed a step behind. I want to just focus on the Kakuno fight because this is a really good example of his long-range striking. That's what I was going to check. So there is a slight reach advantage for Tony Ferguson. He's an inch taller and has a 2-inch reach advantage. So, a little bit of a reach advantage if he can make the most of it. So just watch this finish of the Kakuno fight. Watch how he drifts out of the way. He gets his head out of the way of the return punch, bang, and then catches him right on the end of his reach. There, look. I mean, Tony does throw everything into these punches, but this is a benefit in him being a switch stance fighter. As his weight goes forward with that right hand, if he needs to, he can bring his right foot up behind it and step to a southpaw stance. And we do see him do that a lot. This is how he covers distance so well in the octagon. He tends to bound across the octagon, switching from southpaw to orthodox, but utilizing those long-range kind of loop-in and hook-in punches at the same time as a variety of different spinning attacks and, tumbling and rolling techniques. I also grabbed the very beginning of the Barbosa fight because this is the kind of pressure that I expect him to try and put on Charles Oliveira early. Try and make a statement because he's coming off a loss. Try and stop Charles Oliveira taking his spot in the rankings and in people's minds. And also, really start to use some mean shots and try and do some damage to Charles Oliveira in this fight. One thing that Tony doesn't want to do is he doesn't want to go technique for technique with Oliveira, whether that's in the grappling range or in the striking range. I think the chaos is his benefit in this fight. I think if he's able to just kind of throw a variety of stuff at Oliveira, something might get through. It might daze him, it might hurt him. He might be able to clamp on and get a finish. I do believe Oliveira has got submission losses on his record. He's got 3, but it's been a little while. Guillotine against Lamas and Pettis. What was that? 2016. So just before he moved to lightweight. That is one thing I will say. I did write this down. So he's 12-0 when he joined the UFC. 8 losses on his record in the UFC. 4 times he missed weight between 2012 and 2016. So 2 of those 8 losses that he's picked up were at the same time as him missing weight. So you've got to wonder how much of the struggles that he was having were affecting his performances at 145. I definitely think this is the right weight class for him. I will refer back to my notepad in a moment. So with Tony, I think, if he's able to fight long range but pressure with a high volume, and maybe even step in with some of these elbows and try and catch Oliveira by surprise, he might be able to do some damage and cause a bit of chaos and maybe clamp onto a neck. But this is what Tony Ferguson's so good at. He's just being reactive to what's in front of him, whether it's defensively or offensively. And he does get mixed up. His fights do get scrappy and messy and a bit chaotic. But there is a benefit in that because that's the state at which Tony performs his best. In that chaos. I think I may have said this before. Like there's two ways of approaching MMA really, because chaos is always evident because it's such an unpredictable environment. So when you step into the octagon, you can always bank on chaos being there. So what do you do with that? Well, you either ride it, you either become a part of it, like Tony Ferguson does, and just kind of get after it and just kind of see where the fight goes and go with the ebb and the flow of it, and not really have much of a plan going in. Or maybe have a few knives in your back pocket that you can just throw in if you see the opportunity present. Or the other way is much more the way that Charles Oliveira fights, which is to control the chaos, to manage it, to don't let it get too close, but don't let it get too far. If it's on the ground, I want to make sure I've got clamps on it, and I don't want it to be spinning out of control. And if I do want to get a submission on chaos early, then I need to get it when it's dry, when it's not going to scramble out like a madman. I don't honestly feel like Charles Oliveira is going to be pushed to try and get this fight to the floor, to try and get a submission on Tony. I think he's going to try and wear him down with strikes. I think he's going to feel like he's better than Tony everywhere, and this is his opportunity to not only prove he's better than the top-ranked guys in this division, but also that that he's the one that's deserving of progressive fights from this point, the really big fights. And there's no reason, if you look at Charles Oliveira's record, and the way he celebrates as well, there's no reason why he shouldn't be a huge star. And it might just be a tipping point for Tony. He might, he's still going to be able to beat the majority of guys in this division for a few years to come. But there is going to be a tipping point where we may see him not be able to perform right at the elite level. This is where we're going to find out. Gaethje might have been a turning point. Like I said, the frequency of Tony fighting is part of the problem. In the time that Charles Oliveira's had 9 fights, Tony Ferguson's had 4. Let me just have a quick drink. I'll go through this. I've written this down somewhere. Where is it? Okay, so Charles Oliveira made his debut against Brooks, won that by rear naked choke. Tony Ferguson fought Kevin Lee and won by triangle. Then we had Oliveira fought Felder. Then he fought Guida. Then he fought Christos Giagos. Ferguson fought Pettis. Oliveira fought Miller, Timur, and Lentz. And Ferguson fought Cowboy. And then Oliveira fought Gordon and Lee. And that's when Tony picked up that loss to Gaethje. So, I mean, the work rate of Charles Oliveira is impressive, and he's riding the crest of that momentum right now. He's in a good place, and we're going to see where he's at in comparison to the top guys in this division, because Tony's a problem for everybody. He's a skilled individual everywhere the fight goes. He's chaotic. He's violent. He's a lot of fun to watch, and sometimes people just need that kick up the ass to kind of tweak their game and make them that little bit better. Maybe that's what the Gaethje fight was. It's a toss of a coin. What is he, 36? He's still got some time. He's a bit late on in his career, but this time, if he gets a couple of 3 fights, he's still up at the top of the division. He could quite easily find himself right in another title shot. And just to speculate, if Khabib does come back and fight, he's already expressed that he's not interested in Poirier or McGregor. He's beaten them both. That Tony Ferguson fight's always hanging there. So not only is that a golden ticket for Charles Oliveira to maybe put himself in a position where he could contend for that huge fight or another huge fight, but definitely for Tony Ferguson. If Khabib's coming back for one fight to get to 30-0, the one fight that does make sense right now, the one that's been evading us for so many years, is that Tony Ferguson one. And I certainly think that's a fight that Khabib would want. And Tony Ferguson wants that, because he's been wanting to prove himself against Khabib for a long time. Right. Have I missed anything? I think I've got everything. I think I have. It's a stacked card. UFC 256 was spoiled. Great way to finish the year. So enjoy the fights, and I'll see you next time.